Hello, welcome back to BLENDERSUSHI live noding. As I promised in my previous live noding, I'll gonna show you the right way you can do kind of texturing procedurally for type of curve objects that's kind of parametric. So this is one of such example, and I'm just using the emission shader, and you can see the color that's kind of going through like a color ramp of gradient, and this is actually everything is actually procedural here. I can increase the number of repeat of the rainbow. For example, actually I start from 1 and I can do like a repeat like 30 times or maybe 60 times, and the rainbow is happening because of this color ramp that I set it up. So in order to make it repeat, this thing is also kind of going from yellow to the same color yellow at the very end there, and it's kind of repeat itself after the modulation. So what's the most important attributes here in order for this to work? I'm currently using cycles render, and this is as we know this is a curve object that's generated parametrically using this polyline viewer node in Sverchok. And so in the cycle materials, but before we do that with the object itself, if we scroll in this curve data and scroll and find the texture space, we need to apparently turn on this use UV for mapping, and that's kind of enabling the parametric texture space. So instead of, if I turn it off, you will see that it's not happening, but if you turn that on, and perhaps you also need to adjust the location and size, but safe to say that I'm just using the default, and this is the most important attributes you need to turn on. Once you have that on, it seems to just gonna work with this UV information from texture coordinate nodes inside cycles material. So you see, all I need to do was actually get the UV, which is because of this parametric curve, the UV is kind of automatic all along this like a how can I say, like a polyline or like a curve that makes this structure. This is actually a single curve for the whole thing. And so the UV, I separate it in XYZ, and I kind of experimenting here as well. But basically we are generating a vector that will work with our gradient texture and also color ramp. I found out at some point I was thinking just using the color ramp and using the vector, but apparently this is a better way to do it, using gradient texture with the vector coming in, and then you plug this into the color ramp. The color ramp can be anything. You can try. I can try like a different one. For example, maybe a simpler one. Color ramp node, just black and white. Let's have a look. Look at the result. Plug this into emission shader, and let's do a render. You can't actually see it in the material mode. You can't see the ramp normally. You need to render it out. So you can see it's doing the repeat. Because the way I set it up, there's a very strong kind of a contrast here between the black and white. That's because from this white back to the black, there's some kind of strong edges. In order to fix that, we need to kind of make it goes from white to black to white. So when it's modulate and repeat itself, we get a smoother result. Of course, you can always do it like also something like this, so you get that kind of pattern, like a snake stripes pattern. If we repeat it here like 120 times or something, it's really high value. You can see it's working quite nicely. Actually, I cannot go any higher. No, I can. 400. Yeah, the modulation works really well. So that's nice. So that looks like a snake now. You can change the color, of course. Yeah, so that works really well. So yeah, that's actually really simple. And then this guy actually works if you are using your own texture. It's gonna repeat the texture for you. So I'll show you. If I plug this to the emissions, you see it's doing the repeat of the UV texture. Although if you are using like a square texture, you need to be careful and kind of watch. Maybe you need to do the offset of the texture itself, or kind of doing the scaling of the texture. There's another way, actually. If you are using gradient texture and then kind of piggyback the color ramp, you can create an interesting effect. I'll show you real quick. So there you go. There's kind of a you can think of it like a flow of texture inside the textures. So you have control over the modulation of from 0 to, if you imagine this is 0 to 1 color ramp, and here we are modulating it using this gradient. 0 means black and white means value of 1 means white. So if you modulate it using this gradient, you have another extra control on top of this. So you can actually randomize it using grayscale, and if I'm using like a rainbow color here, this line, you're gonna get quite an interesting effect. So make it like between red and yellow, and you get like orange. And because I have grayscale here, I can actually add that kind of variations. So yeah, this is actually a compilations of a few kind of blog posts. I saw the way to set up to set this up from Blender Stack Exchange, and then there's also one from blog. I'll put all the links in the comments below, so you can have a read as well. But this is pretty much the summary of all those techniques. Yeah, so basically, I guess the secret is really in all this texture coordinate and how you use this texture coordinate data, whether it's generated or whether this is UV. This is using the UV of the curve, which is parametric. From what I know, curve and surface objects, that's actually like a nerve surface in Blender, even though it's limited. I know that this works really well for any kind of polygon edges that's become a polyline curve. This technique will work really well, especially so if you have like a snake kind of texture, this will repeat itself quite nicely all along the curve. Yeah, so if I make this a little bit prettier, just by plugging this into the glossy and the diffuse, so instead of using the emission, I know that this also give a nicer results, kind of like a cheap subsurface scattering. And we have these. So this is a gradient texture going in there. Did I forget? Maybe I need to plug this in as well. Mix shader emission. Okay, this should go in there. So that's a little bit nicer because we have the diffuse and the gloss, and also subsurface scattering happening, and we have this rainbow spectrum. But you can use any kind of color ramp, and the result is all these repeating stripes over the curve. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this live noding. Hopefully this is useful. So this is a mix of Sverchok procedural modeling with just a simple polyline curve node, and we also work with a cycle material and generate this pattern. Of course, this seems a lot simpler now because of the procedural exercise that we've been doing all during this live noding. We know the fact that modulo functions can kind of repeat texture if you kind of doing it the right way. So yeah, this is the result. hopefully you like it and enjoy this